You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. In this episode, I'd like to share some ideas with you that I've been thinking about from the research that I've been doing for my new book. I'm currently writing another book, and it's going to be about 4 ways to quit the rat race. And it's going to be based on a lot of the ideas that I've talked about in The Voluntary Life in the past. And especially, it's going to be based on the interviews that I've done with fantastic people who've found their own ways to quit the rat race and live the lives that they want to choose, that I've interviewed on my podcast. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, and it's going to take a while to finish this book. But in the meantime, I just wanted to share some ideas with you that I've been thinking about in the process of writing it. And in particular, today I wanted to talk about 2 questions that are fundamental to your whole life. 2 vital questions that are so important that the way that you answer them will determine how you use your life, whether you get to make the most of it and take advantage of this amazing opportunity that you have being alive, or whether you waste it, and how much of it you waste. And I want to talk about this because I realized that it took me a long time to really become conscious of how important these 2 questions are, how interrelated they are, and how it is my responsibility to come up with a strategy and a clear, conscious plan for how I'm going to address these 2 questions in my life. So what am I talking about, and what are these 2 questions? Well, they're pretty straightforward. The first question is, how are you going to get financial security or independence? And the second question is, how are you going to get fulfillment? So what I mean is, by the first question, how are you going to get financial security or independence? How are you going to get to a position where you're not living hand to mouth, where you have enough financial resources and enough financial security that you're able to do what you want with your life, where you're not stuck in the rat race, basically? And the second question, how are you going to get fulfillment? What I mean by that is, what are you going to do with your life that is going to give you the sense that you have lived fully and taken advantage of this amazing opportunity to really use the time that you have to do what you think is important and what you think is meaningful and what you think is the best way that you could be spending your life, the most fulfillment or joy or sense of achievement, sense of completeness that you can have from living. What is it that you need to do in order to give you that sense of motivation and fulfillment? And the thing about these 2 questions is that it's so easy to focus on answering one and to have a strategy for the way that you approach one of those questions that ruins the strategy that you have for the other question, even though they're both absolutely crucial. So, for example, if you focus on financial security, and if you leave fulfillment aside and just think that you'll deal with that one day, many people who do that get into a situation where they work in a job that they hate in order to make enough money to give themselves some financial security. And often it's a very self-defeating strategy, because people who spend their time doing things that they hate, like a job they hate, just in order to make money, end up trying to get fulfillment by spending that money, which actually doesn't lead them to any more financial security, and it becomes self-defeating, and that postpones their true time of fulfillment even further until some time when they're retired and they're too old and frail, they don't have the vitality that they once had to actually enjoy their so-called retirement and to gain the fulfillment that they've waited so long to try and have. On the other hand, if you focus on fulfillment first and you don't think about financial security, then it's very easy to let the years go by without thinking about financial security and without really paying attention to your finances until the point where you realize that you are so in debt or so financially insecure that you have no provision for the future, and you spend your whole time running to catch up with the financial mess that you've made. And many people live like that as well. So that's why I think it's useful to think about these 2 questions as linked, interrelated questions that it is so vital to have a very conscious and clear strategy throughout life for how you address these questions. How are you getting financial security or independence? And how are you getting fulfillment? What do you propose to do? And if you propose to focus more on one than the other at any point in your life, that's totally cool too, as long as you have a strategy for how you expect things to work out and, how you expect yourself to get a good answer to both of these questions as you go through life. And, some people have a strategy where they attempt to find a very fulfilling job where they gain fulfillment from their work and they also gain financial security from their work. Other people see work as something very separate from where they aim to get their fulfillment, and they see work purely as a means to an end for solving the question of how to get financial security, and then they look to other means of getting fulfillment in their lives, either outside work in their free time and their pursuits that they do with their leisure time, or through their family relationships or their personal relationships. That's where they find fulfillment. And what you choose to do is entirely up to you, and it's going to be different for everyone, what your strategy is. I personally think that it is a really great idea to go for financial independence, to go for the point where you can actually get to a level of financial security where you don't have to work and you can do whatever you want with your time. That to me is the ultimate answer to the question of financial security. And in order to do it, you have to also be frugal and think about how to live efficiently with the resources that you have and so forth. But whatever you choose to do in answering these two questions is up to you. What I will do, though, is to suggest some more ways of thinking about these two questions. So in terms of the first question, how are you going to get financial security? There are really three sub-questions to that. If you want financial security and independence, you've got to do three things. Firstly, you have to create something of value. You have to be able to bring value into the world, to make something or do something that other people find so valuable that they're willing to give you resources for it. They're willing to pay you for it. Whether that's through a high-paying job or whether it's through entrepreneurship or your skills, whatever it is that you do, you've got to find something that you can do that other people appreciate and value so much that they're willing to pay you well for it. And the second thing that you have to do is, when you do create new value and acquire resources through your skills and your services and products that you provide, then you have to find a way of consuming less than you acquire, of saving, of putting aside resources for the future so that you are building up financial security that you're able to fall back on. And there's lots and lots of practical questions around that, but the ultimate question that you're trying to address is, how are you going to save and how are you going to put aside surplus every month so that you are building a nest egg for the future? What is your strategy for actually saving money? And the third part of the question is, when you do save, what are you going to do with those savings? How are you going to invest them in a way that gives you a return, that brings you a productive return on your investment, that it keeps your investment safe and really maximizes the potential of your resources? So that's sort of the subtopics underneath this question of how are you going to get financial security that I think it's worthwhile thinking about. And when it comes to fulfillment, there are also three topics to think about in that question that I also find very helpful. And these come from Dan Pink's book, Drive, The Hidden Truth About What Motivates Us. And it's a very useful book about motivation, in particular intrinsic motivation. I've talked about it before. And the key things that he talks about are the intrinsic motivations of purpose, mastery, and autonomy. So, in other words, purpose is the motivation that comes from doing something that you believe in, that you think is important, that gives you a sense of doing something that is meaningful to you. Mastery is the motivation that comes from really being good at something, being really effective, being able to do something with great skill and efficacy, and that brings a lot of fulfillment, getting really good at what you do. And autonomy is the fulfillment that comes from freedom, from doing what you want in the way that you think you should do it, and not being micromanaged by other people, and getting a sense that you're able to make your own choices in your own life. And those are the kinds of qualities that you can either seek through your work, whatever you do to make money, or you can seek them outside work. So I hope that's helpful to, just put those questions out there for you, get you thinking about your strategy for those two fundamental questions in life as you go through life. I'm going to be talking about it more in my book, in my upcoming book. And I do also talk about this in the book that I've just released, Becoming an Entrepreneur, which you can find on Amazon or on the website, thevoluntarylife.com. Love to hear your thoughts about this. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.